Dito na naman tayo ngayon sa week 12 ng klase natin sa Readings in Philippine History or JEC 112 natin. So, nandito na po tayo sa week 12 and our topic is all about the report of the cholera epidemic in the Philippines. So, gano'n siya ka-importante? Okay, so, pandemic kasi siya. Okay, so, we can relate it somehow sa ating pandemic. So, learning objectives natin, by the end of the lesson, the student will be able to recognize the experience of an epidemic in the history of the Philippines, create strategies to develop resiliency from pandemics, and visualize scenario from early Filipinos who struggle from survival. So, sa panahon kasi ito, medyo related siya ngayon sa COVID natin. Ito kasi, dapat ma-appreciate natin ano yung ma-recognize natin yung experience nila before para may ma-learn tayo. Okay? And of course, paano ba sila lumaban sa pandemic na yon? And of course, ano yung mga struggle nila doon, how can we survive to it? Okay? So, the 1899 and 1902 War of Resistance and 1902-1904 Cholera Epidemic belong to two distinct series in Philippine historiography. The fight against cholera of 1902-1904 has been represented as a drama whose theme is American heroism and medico-sanitary skill. Cholera was introduced into Marikina Valley of Manila by troops sent to guard against infection of the Manila water supply. So, dito tayo yan. Sa water supply talaga tinatarget ng cholera. Cholera claimed its victims from levels of society, including American soldiers and residents, prominent Filipinos, Chinese, and Spaniards. Development in 19th century medicine contributed to the convergence of colonial warfare and disease control. Okay? Katulong natin yung American dito. In March 1902, it was the fourth year of Philippine-American War. Many towns in Luzon, hamleted by the Americans, suffered from famine. Ito yung famine, tagutom na. Di ba, pamilya sa COVID, may mga tagutom din nangyari. In Isabela, Emilio Aguinaldo would be soon captured. In Batangas, Miguel Marbar felt forced to surrender soon, so that rice could be planted in May. To top it all, cholera arrived. For the inhabitants to the war-torn areas, it was ultimately a choice between dying for hunger or dying for cholera. Ang daming problema dito, hindi lang tagutom, pati cholera din. From historian Reynaldo Ilito. In March 1902, a vessel from Hong Kong arrived in Manila carrying cholera. So, yung galing para sa Hong Kong, okay? Yung vessel sa Hong Kong carrying cholera. Soon after the first cases of cholera surfaced sa Hong Kong, galing na, take note, cholera was imposed to obtain because of Filipinos and even American troops themselves moved around carrying the bacteria. Cholera was not selected. It claimed as victims people from different strata of society. Mayaman ka man, mahirap, Filipino ka man, or Spaniard, Chinese. Also, but the lower classes were the hardest hit kasi nga walang pera, walang panggamot. Especially in certain districts in Manila. Because overcrowding, poor sanitation, or poor diet, by the time of the epidemic ended on about 100,461 died and 4,300 in which were in Manila. Okay, ang dami dito. The cholera epidemic gave way to the elite calls germ warfare. Sa atin, di pa dito various warfare. Another stage of the Philippine-American War during this time, where the military surgeons become next phase of pacifiers after the cavalrymen and troops. Searches and surveillance were conducted among Filipino homes and ferret out of sick and quarantine them. Filipino response was concealment and evasion since they refused to part with their sick family members. So within, may comment dito, within the cholera combat zone, colonial officials prohibited gathering of people. So parang COVID lang. Iniwasan talaga baka kumalat of people in places considered conducive to spread of cholera like churches, cockpits, yung mga sabungan. Officials also reported burning the house of cholera victims, sinusunog. Diba may mga case kasi ng COVID na yung mga bed talaga hindi lang nililinis, sinusunog. Lalo na pag namatay na yung tao dyan. Even gathering places like town or market. By cremating, kinikremate din po dati. Cholera casualties. They elicited for the resistance and hated among Filipinos whose religious practices demanded proper burial. So, may away po dito nangyayari kasi nga ayaw ng mga religious group na i-cremate kasi nga dapat may burial, proper burial. So, ito yung report, by the way. You can read here. You can report from the cholera epidemic in the Philippines. So reports are now being received by medical officers, so you can read here from the special correspondent. So Basahin natin dito, reports are now being received from medical officers of the Army relative to the epidemic of cholera in the Philippines, especially as it has directed and indirectly affected CE Woodwork, Chief Surgeon, and 3rd Brigade Batangas Luzon. Summarizes the reports rendered by the surgeons 24 Station of Laguna, Batangas Province, Luzon, and complies with the instructions issued to the Office of the Chief Surgeon. Follows to investigate as far as yung mga causes ng cholera, to investigate ang duly proportion of deaths, and to determine parang siyang COVID talaga. You can read here, talag dito, in advance. Dito rin ako kuha ng mga questions, okay? So, meron din tinatawag dito na incubation stage. Okay, incubation, cholera. Okay, meron din ganon, nangyayari din siya. Para siyang COVID talaga. So, official publication of the report by Cholera Epidemic Philippines po yun. So, Elito notes that powerful drug, strict quarantine, and cremation of dead did not end cholera. So, of course, kasi ginagawa na lang yun pag may nangyari na. Rather, it was combination of the heavy rains and increasing immunity of the populace that caused epidemic to subdue. So, ito yung nangyari, cholera talaga. So, the deadly 1902 cholera epidemic in the Philippines with special interest on its consequences in Batangas. Anong nangyari sa Batangas? The disease, cholera, is an infection to the small intestine. Sa intestine po siya that leads to diarrhea, no, pagtatae, pagsusuka, muscle cramps. It caused by bacterium called Vibrio cholera that can be transmitted by unsanitary water or foods. Okay, sa pagkain, and persons infected with this disease may suffer severe dehydration, pag-uga, walang dehydrated, walang tubig sa katawan. Electrolyte imbalance, which may in turn result to death. The mortality rate, the disease anything to 5 to 50% depending on the ability of the treatment. Grabe talaga yun ka deadly. Occasionally, cholera epidemics worldwide reach pandemic level. So, pag epidemia kasi sa maliit pa siya nakuan. Medyo sa nation pa or sa regional aspects. Pero pag pandemic na halos buong parang COVID ba, pandemic, no, parang buong mundo na naapektuhan talaga nito. Spread over large region first, multiple continents, and even worldwide na pagkalahatan na. First pandemic to reach Philippines was one in 1892. Ito yung first talaga during Spanish era. There were passing references in the various histories, Batangas called historical data. So, we know that the pandemic affected the province as well, okay? So, probinsya talaga naapektuhan. There is small available documentation in the 6th global pandemic which raged through the Philippines, including Batangas from 1902 to 1904. So, despite these measures, the colonists somehow managed to slip through. The following day, the Board of Health was informed that San Juan Religious Hospital, the 2 patients were exhibiting symptoms of Asiatic cholera. By March 2022, the presence of disease was confirmed. Dito yung nag-start talaga. Despite efforts by American officials to contain the spread of disease, before long it did so, the communities along Pasig River, including Manila, naapektuhan na. Kina-quarantine din. Quarantine guards were stationed on the roads, paths, and streams of leading Manila to prevent the disease from spreading provinces. So dito, yung kasi sa tubig din siya sometimes dumadaloy. May mga times kasi naiinom yung tubig. So, yung mga dito, yung mga gwardya, ginagwardya na yung pots before, yung tubig, yung stains para pagka may gagamit doon, magkulera pa sila. It was likely brought along with them by people who sleep quarantine by riding bangka and crossfield instead of using roads to get to Manila. On May 24, the first case of cholera infection of Batangas was confirmed in the town of Buwan. Okay? So, how cholera spread so swiftly was likely due to a number of factors. First nito, factors is scarcity of doctors. Walang doctors, hindi kagad napigilan, kaya yun nangyari. Which in turn, may diagnose and treatment, not just cholera, difficult. So, kaya nga, naging malala na yung sakit. Sanitary conditions then were also understandably poor by present standard before. And water for drinking, wala kasing uso. Dati kasi hindi pa purified. Okay, hindi pa uso yung mga mineral something. Personal hygiene then was pitched in many cases of open wells of rivers. Doon naliligo, doon umiinom. In fact, when the American first tried to control the disease in Manila by distributing distilled water, many among the educated suspected were being poisoned. When the first case of cholera was confirmed in Batangas, it had just a month or so since Batangueños were allowed to return to their homes. So, umabuti ng buwan from concentration camps where they were forced to live by United States Army since December previously year. After studying burial records in the towns of Lipa and Batangas, the historian Glenn A. May conjectured the zones or concentrated camps were unhealthy places to live and that the number of deaths was extraordinarily high during the months of concentration. Sometimes kasi, okay, kina-quarantine sila sa isang lugar na yan, nagkamayroon na po ng concentration doon. Meaning, doon na nag-concentrate yung sakit. No? Para kasing, okay, parang pag pumunta ka ng hospital, parang kayo na lahat doon may sakit. No? Unlike sa community na ikaw lang dyan, kung quarantine ka lang, ikaw lang may sakit, yung paligid mo naman, walang sakit, so walang concentration, mababa lang. In other words, the general state of health among Batangueños after the release from the concentration camp would be poor, particularly faced raging pandemic. So while the disease raged, the Board of Health decreed that no funeral services would be allowed churches. So hindi na daw pwedeng i-allowed sa mga churches or sa mga mosque. Kaya oftentimes nga, suggestion dito, kailangan daw i-cremate na lang. In times, measures undertaken by Board of Health would result in decline of diseases among spread. Among others, this included educational campaign, no? Dapat talaga, distilled water, iba na yung sa sale ng food sa panglabas, no? Para maiwasan yung disease. And overall, however, by the time the Board of Health declared that the disease had disappeared from Luzon in 1904, in Batangas, the final number reported cases were almost 3,435 with almost 3,000 deaths. The mortality rate was staggering. Grabe. Ito yung pamatay talaga na number, 79%. There would be more outbreaks of the disease in the country in the coming years, but certainly not of the same scale of pandemic rage noong 1902 or 1904. Take note of this. Okay? Pakalalabas yan, of course. So, of course, basahin niyo pong sources natin. Ito yung sources natin. May mga website tayo dito. Basahin niyo. And look at this, okay? Questions to ponder. Given the current situation ngayon, COVID, using the table below, may table tayo dito. Yan. Table below. Compare the scenarios of both cholera and epidemics in 1902 and the COVID-1909 in the Philippines terms. So, A, the number of persons infected as the real-time COVID, speed of spread of infection, effect of the economy, effect of the social activities of the people. So, ito yon mga indicators natin dito. So, ito yon indicators. Number of persons infected. Noong 1902, ilan? Ilan yung final talaga? Until now, ilan yung ngayon? The speed of spread. Buwan lang ba o taon? Naging pandemic na? So, from epidemic, kailan siya naging pandemic? How fast in terms of date niya yung dapat na malaman, okay? Effect on the economy, of course, bagsak yung ekonomiya dito. Effect on the social activities, okay, siguro. Social distancing, strategy of the government, ano yung ginagawa nila? Oftentimes, gusto ko makita ito, mga batas, ano yung mga batas na pinasa nila, okay? So, yun lang po, and I believe we learned something. Read that report, okay? Ito, i-read mo to. Okay, read mo to. Ito yung kuan talaga. Report nila, parang jaryo siya. Itong report na to, okay? It's helpful, okay? So, yun lang po yung, ito lang po natatapos yung kuan natin. I believe we learned something in connection sa COVID natin ngayon. Relevant tong topic na to. Kasi nga nangyari para to before. Anong ginawa nila? Siguro may mga kapalpakan sa mga gobyerno ngayon. Kaya nila nasabi yun kasi there is a connection and comparison na sa nangyari before, okay? So, yan lang po. Thank you. Mag-study kayo.